Hi friends, welcome back to Getting Slightly Better at Music. Episode 2. How can we set up PA systems quickly and efficiently, not waste a lot of time? Basically, a PA system has three main parts: microphone, mixer, and speaker. So obviously, usually we have a lot more than one microphone, and sometimes we have more than one speaker. Usually we have two speakers and maybe one monitor speaker, or as many as we need. There's usually only one mixer though. So what does a PA system do? Well, it takes sound as captured by a microphone, goes into the mixer, which kind of gets it ready for the speaker, and then the speaker makes it into a louder sound. Hopefully something that sounds like what went into it over here. So that's kind of all it does. But the PA system is an essential part of live music as we know it. Unless you're playing purely acoustic music in your living room or in a specially designed concert hall, there's going to be some kind of PA system. Anytime you have a vocalist and instruments like drums or electric guitar, anything like that, you're going to have a PA system for the vocals to be heard over the band. So then we can almost treat the PA system as kind of like an instrument in its own right. So when we start to think of it that way, we realize how important it is to know what we're going to do with our PA system before we even get to the gig. So in the same way that you wouldn't show up to your gig without knowing what songs you're going to play, or knowing what your guitar rig is going to be, or what your drum set's going to be, you wouldn't want to show up to the gig without knowing what your PA system is going to look like when you get there. So one of our main ingredients that we're going to need to make our PA system is an input list. So what is an input list? Well, it's really just a list of all the things you want to put into your system. So what would that be? So your priority is going to be things that are going to need help from the PA system, like vocals, also acoustic guitar, keyboards, and then kick drum. So without a PA system, you wouldn't really be able to hear those in a band context at all. So you're definitely going to have to put those in your system. But if you have enough channels available, then you can add all the instruments you have on the stage and then be able to put those into the system. But it's important to remember that just because you have all those inputs in your system doesn't mean you can really control all of them. Often people make the mistake of thinking, well, if I just get everything in, then I can control every aspect of the sound and everything's going to be cool. Well, that's not really true, because in a live performance, the sound coming off the stage from things like drums and guitar and bass, that's going to determine what your overall sound is. Also, that's how loud your performance is going to be. You can only add loudness on top of what's coming off the stage. So think carefully about what you want in your mix. So what would a typical input list look like? Well, it depends on how big your mixer is, and how elaborate your production is, basically, and also how big your performance space is. Because if you're in a small room like a cafe, you're not going to need the drums to be mic'd at all. You're not going to need the guitars to be in the system at all, or bass. All you're really going to need are vocals. But as your performance space gets bigger, then you're going to need more power from your PA, so that everyone in the audience can hear the whole picture that you want to put across. So first of all, let's see a typical band arrangement on an 8-channel mixer, just a small little mixer. This should serve a regular rock band pretty well. That should let everyone in the audience hear your performance pretty clearly. The guitar player is using, a nice tube amp the electric guitar is probably not going to be in the mix anyway. There's not going to be any need to turn it up even more. So you could just delete that and put keys in there. Okay, so now let's look at a 16 channel input. So this is a little bit bigger of a mixer. This is kind of the standard for most bands that are playing in a larger room, like maybe 200 to 300 people in the audience, or just a band that has more resources available to them and want to elevate their production value a little bit. So again, we start with kick drum, and then we have snare drum. So those are always going to be core parts of your mix. But now we see we've added 3 tom mics. So you might be wondering, well, why not just have an overhead mic? Well, when you're doing live sound, a distant overhead mic is not really going to give you anything you want. When you're doing live sound, you want to have a nice direct sound to kind of cut through the overall wash of sound. So you want to get nice and close to your sources. So you want a mic on your toms. Then you have bass again. You see now we have 2 electric guitars and an acoustic guitar. You see we have 2 keyboard inputs, so that might be a piano and a synthesizer, or maybe it's just a stereo digital piano. Either way, we have more inputs, so we can do 2 different ones. And we see I have more background vocals, so we can cover more of our band maybe. And we have our lead vocal again. So you notice on channel 16 we have a talk back mic. So that's a microphone that you have at your mixer so that you can talk to the band that's on the stage. So in a smaller room, you're not going to need that. You can just talk to whoever's there. But when you get into a bigger room, then you have to have a talk back mic to aid in communication. So the great thing about having this list is that we can plan not only what instruments are we going to have, but what kind of microphones are we going to need, what kind of stands are we going to need, how many mic cables are we going to need. You can have all of that arranged ahead of time and know when you arrive at the gig that you have enough stuff to cover your band, a band that's opening, a guy with a guitar that's playing a few songs. You know that you got it covered. So we can do that with this list. Okay, so now let's look at our input list and our microphone list and stand list. So this isn't a definitive listing. These are just sort of typical choices that you'd make. So let's look at our stands. So we'll see we'll need about half and half of boom stands or tall stands, kind of like this one, and then short stands for things like amps and drums. So having the right size stand for the job will save you a lot of work when it comes to just lugging all this stuff in and lugging it out, and it will save a lot of room on stage, which is always good. So it's just good to know how many stands and what kinds of stands you will need before you go into it, so you can bring the right stuff. So another little document that can help you and save you a lot of time is a stage plot. So basically a stage plot is just a drawing of what your band is going to look like on stage, kind of top down. So that'll help you figure out where to put your instruments. It'll help your bandmates to know where to put their instruments. And it'll also help you to visualize what are you going to need as far as microphones, microphone stands, where can you put your cables, where can you put your snake, all that stuff. So this is a basic 4-piece band, just like we were talking about before with our input list. We have our drums in the back, and we have a guitar amp over here, another guitar, bass, and these are our players. So we got a lead vocalist who plays guitar, a guitar player, bass player. We have a keyboard over here. Maybe our bass player plays keyboard too sometimes, and our drummer back here, of course. So this will help us to know where are we going to put our microphones. So on our kick drum, we're going to need our kick drum microphone, snare drum microphone. We're going to need mics on these toms. All these guitar amps are going to need microphones, and our bass is going to be a DI box. So of course we have to have vocals for our band, so we'll need vocal microphones for them, and a singing drummer, why not? And don't forget we have an acoustic guitar DI box down here for our lead guitar player who's going to play acoustic guitar sometimes, our lead singer. So with this in mind, we can show this to our bandmates. So we can say, drummer, you're going in the back, in the center, guitar player, you're going to be over here, bass player, you're going to be over here, put your keyboard here. So So this way we know where everything goes and we don't have to move things around too much when we get there. So it's not super important where each instrument goes per se, as long as everybody is happy with the arrangement and knows where they're going to go. So with this in mind, we can see we're going to have our vocal microphones here, so our vocal inputs. So our cables are going to come off there. So we can put our snake over here, our snake head stage box, or a digital mixer, or really fancy. Those are all going to go there. And then all our instrument microphones and GIs are going to go back. But this way, we know that we're going to need this much cable to get around the stage and not go across. We don't want that. That makes for a messy stage, and it makes for tripping hazards, and it's just not good. It's not aesthetically pleasing. Okay, so we've looked at our input lists and our stage plot. So now how can we use those effectively to be able to set up faster and more efficiently? Well, we can split up our planning into 2 phases: before the gig and on the day of the gig. Maybe in the week or so before your gig, think about what you're going to need to do this gig. So that'll involve writing out your input list, drawing up your stage plot, talking to your band members, and also any other bands or groups or people that might be playing at the same event, coordinating all of that stuff, and also scoping out your venue where you're going to play, if at all possible, and find out how big is the stage, how many electrical outlets are there, stuff like that. Those are all really good to know, so you can bring the right number of extension cords too. Also very important. Then, on the day of the gig, you want to do as little thinking about any of this stuff as possible. If you've done all of your homework here, you should be able to focus on rocking out, which is what you want to do. That's what you're really there for, right? Before that though, you'll probably have to pick up some rental equipment. So you want to get there early, pick up your stuff that you needed based on what you figured out you needed from doing your input list and your stage plot. Then you want to get to your venue as soon as possible, obviously. Set up your band equipment first if you can, if everyone is there, and then set up your PA equipment, because your PA stuff will usually be in front of the band equipment. It'll just make for less being in people's way. And then once you have everything plugged in and turned on, then you can do sound check. Again, if you've done all this stuff, if you've really thought about it in advance, sound check should not take that long. At most, it should take an hour. Ideally, it should take 15 minutes. Of course, that relies on the band, all your musicians being really focused too, but if everything's going well, sound check should take about 15 minutes. You really don't want to, get bogged down in making decisions or rethinking your whole life, things like that, or trying to add more bands or more people that have just showed up at the last minute. You don't want to deal with that. You want to just stick to the plan. And then finally, when everything goes well, then you just rock out. If there's anything you would like me to talk about more, put a comment down below, and maybe we'll make another video talking about more technical stuff, more advanced techniques or whatever. Until next time, keep getting slightly better at music.